Hey there, it's Russell. Welcome to the Reading Fabricator, and today I'm going to do a little biography called Touching from a Distance, Ian Curtis and Joy Division by Deborah Curtis. It is sort of the closest we'll ever get to finding out about the life of Ian Curtis from the band Joy Division and previously known as Warsaw through the words of his then wife Deborah. And one thing I did notice from reading this was that it reads as though it takes place over many decades, but really this is only like a few years in the life of this really interesting character. And I emphasize the word interesting because he really was a character. He comes across as a bit of a bastard in this book, a bit of an asshole, but his work is of course legendary. I mean, Joy Division was one of the preeminent post-punk bands out there. They really set the bar for what was to come. So they were really ahead of their time. I really like Joy Division, and I found this book in the local store, and I just had to get it. I just had to find out more about him because Ian Curtis is almost a legendary figure in and of himself, and it's it's really it's something. I don't know if I love it, but it's curious to see the life of someone told from the point of view of someone else who was with them. Because you only find out half the story. You only find out from that person about their life rather than hearing from the person it's about. Unfortunately, Ian Curtis died quite young. I think he committed suicide when he was 23. If he had lived longer, I would have loved to have seen what he wrote about their marriage. And that's what this book is mostly about, is their marriage at the forefront and the whole band thing sort of emanating on the side. But it's not just the years based in the band, it's also a lot of times before that as well. It goes from his birth all the way through, mostly through his teenage years, from when he met his then wife, his future wife Deborah, all the way through the band years. How he kept on having these dreams and aspirations of being somebody, of achieving greatness. One thing I did notice in this book though, and it's quite eerie, is just this guy was doomed from the start. I mean, you could see death just hovering over him, just the Grim Reaper ready to take him at any moment. He was always fascinated by the ideas of death, by those who died early, by films that talk about death. In particular, he also had quite a fascination with Nazi Germany as well, the literature, and of course with the whole name that Joy Division comes from, which is a group of enslaved women during the war who were given as basically relief to the soldiers, sex slaves pretty much. That's where Joy Division comes from, and I think Warsaw comes from that sort of time period as well. So he has a certain type. He has a fascination for that sort of thing, of the really downbeat, trodden, and just bizarre. But also, now that I've read this, I'm going to be listening to their music on a whole different level. I mean, now I'm really going to be paying attention to the lyrics and seeing just how much they how much I respond to how it affected his life. Mostly because through the words of Deborah Curtis, and she is quite a good writer as well. I don't know what her background is and what her career path is, apart from talking about in this book about working various jobs, but she can write. It's nothing too fancy. There's not a lot of, call them similes or metaphors or whatever have you, or just trying to craft beautiful sentences. There's nothing flowery about this. It's straight, it's to the point, it's matter of fact. It is exactly what a biography should be. There's nothing that distills it from the rest, that makes it different from the rest. But of course, it's a subject matter that you're interested in. It's a subject matter which is why you want to read it. And of course, that's why I read it. And it flows beautifully. You're able to read it from beginning to end without any interruptions. And because it takes place over such a distilled small time span, it feels as though you're really rushing through things, but at an enclosed space. By that, I mean it takes its time with the years that you spend with Ian Curtis. Of course, because he died so young, there's only so few years you can cover. And as I said before, it really, the elements were stacked up against this guy. He was a really, an asshole is probably the biggest word to describe him, but he could also be kind, and he could be seen as, sharing things with people. There was a moment in the book where him and Deborah are walking. He's eating something and he sees a homeless man and gives his food to the homeless man, despite being incredibly poor. I mean, that's the one recurring factor in this book, is that they were both poor the entirety of Ian Curtis's life, even during the marriage, and he seemed to be oblivious to it until the very end. Then there was also his infidelity and his relationship with someone from Europe by the name of Anik, and how Deborah found out about that. There was the thing where, as the band was starting out, the girlfriends and Deborah were allowed to go and visit the gigs, but then eventually they kept getting shut out and shut out until eventually Deb wasn't allowed to just go to the shows altogether. So there was this thing of Deborah and Ian Curtis just completely separating, just very gradually just moving apart from each other, despite Ian being such a needy person, basically. And then you have the whole Fitz, the epilepsy, which is almost foreshadowed quite heavily early on when he works at a disabled centre for employment, where you're looking to find employment for those who are disabled, most including people with epilepsy, and he has to go to a seminar and learn about epilepsy, only to find out that he has epilepsy later on in his life, and it becomes quite severe. There are times where he has multiple attacks, and then other times where he seems to get on fine. And it also depends on his mood. I think the tablets and medication might have affected his mood as well, which contributed towards his suicide. So, he's really interesting. His love of literature as well. He has such a huge love of literature, particularly the author J.G. Ballard, who I quite like indeed. I've read, I think, High Rise and Crash, and there was another one thrown in there, A Concrete Island. I've yet to read The Atrocity Exhibition, which I think that title is used for one of the songs on his second album, Closer. And then I've also got Running Wild here, which I'm about to start as well, a short book, so I'm looking forward to getting into that. So he has a true love of literature. He's a true love of music, particularly that of Iggy Pop, David Bowie, and I can't remember the third one, Lou Reed. He has real love for that punk era in the 70s. You know, even though their music sort of transcended that a little bit as they went on later on. Although what you find out in this book here is that the early concerts, particularly that as Warsaw, it was almost this energetic, eclectic sort of feeling to it. You know, you almost feel like the way it's written that you were there and he was smashing up the sets, and there were even times where he was destroying props and that on stage and causing cuts in his legs and that sort of thing. So he was really trying to emulate that time period, even though their later stuff, you know, you wouldn't think that from what you hear. So now I'm going to read from a section of this book here, because I just have to read from every time I do a video. And I think it's quite good. As I said before, the wording is not flowery. There's nothing spectacular about it, but it does give you a sense of what it's like. This is just a small paragraph. Ian would have made a gifted actor. He convinced us all that the conflicts in his life were caused by outside influences, and that the stress he was suffering was a direct result of the lifestyle he was leading. Truly, as his own judging Gowler, he had engineered his own hell and planned his own downfall. The people around him were merely minor characters in his play. This is towards the end of the book. I mean, there's only like 10 pages still onto this thing. And this is a short book. It's only like 140 pages. The reason it's a bit thicker than that is because it also includes his discography and all the lyrics to all his songs. If you ever want to read along, even though Spotify now has lyrics, but it's there for you. And of course, there's only so many songs they did, because they're only together as Joy Division for 2 years and Warsaw for like 2 years before that as well. So it was a very short time span. But for a 140-page book, it really goes in depth. There's a lot to admire here. There's a lot that I found out about him and his family and his personal life, particularly when he first had his child with Deb. You see how it really affected him. There's also when they got their family dog as well, and he used to carry around pictures of his dog with him when he went away out for recordings and for little pub gigs, which Deb thought of as being that he loved the dog more than he loved them. There's always talks of poverty and of not being able to pay bills. So it's a real working class type book. It really adheres to the working class people. And that's something I could engage with, because as an apprentice I make shit wage. I'm on minimum wage as it is anyway, so I can understand what that's like. But as it stands, I'm in awe of Deborah Curtis and her ability to write. She could have had a fascinating career as a non-fiction writer. So if she has written anything else, I'll definitely want to read it. But I really do like it. Touching from a Distance is a fantastic cover as well. It really gives you, especially after you've read it, it really clicks with you. It gives you a sense of what their relationship was like. And this book is about that. Even though it is of Joy Division, it is at the forefront about their relationship and its deterioration. So there's an element of true sadness to that. Ian Curtis was pretty much a lost soul. He was not destined for a long life on this planet. And I mean, for those who did know him, they, particularly Deb, they knew of his attempted suicides previous to that and his many overdoses and the time periods in his teens when he used to go around and scam old people out of their medication. There were times during his early years in high school where him and a friend would go over to old people's homes. It was part of a curriculum activity, I think, where they actually had to go and entertain the elderly. And while one would distract them, the other one would go into the bathroom and look for medication. And they found, I think it was a schizophrenic's medication, and they took it, and they were just out of their minds from it. And I think they had to get their stomach pumped or something like that. I'm not quite sure. So yeah, he was doomed from the start. Really, really was. And it is truly sad, but he was who he was, and of course he led behind a great legacy. Of course, his bandmates Steve Morris, Bernard Sumner, and Peter Hook went on to do New Order. So you got a whole new thing out of that. Of course, Blue Monday is a great song. So something did come out of nothing. And Joy Division now has the grand status as being one of the prominent acts of the time. And their only two albums, Unknown Pleasures and Closer, are widely ranked as some of the greatest work of that time period, if not of all time. I rank Unknown Pleasures as one of my favorite albums of all time, particularly the song Shadow Play. I absolutely love it. Great song. Brilliant, especially that guitar bit. You'll know what I'm talking about. But I'm going to leave it at that. So if you're one of the few people out there who do like Joy Division and find this interesting, then by all means, go and read Touching from a Distance, the closest you'll ever get to an Ian Curtis biography. You will probably like it. You'll probably think of him a little bit differently than what you previously did, but I don't think that should affect the way you appreciate and approach his music. It's a totally different thing, and it is amazing music. I'm going to leave it at that. So thank you very much for watching, and all the best. Yeah, like, subscribe, and if you have any comments, then comment below. Otherwise than that, see you next time. Bye.